Hi, it's John Taschek here with CloudBlog. For the first time, we are interviewing one of our own members of the CloudBlog team to talk about the differences between the clouds. One of them we call, or is known as the private cloud, and one is known as the public cloud. I think, Peter, I've never seen anyone elucidate on this better than you. Can you explain a little bit, what is a private cloud? Is that real?
The label of private cloud is dangerously seductive because it takes private, which is an adjective people like, and cloud, which is a noun that people like, and puts them together in a phrase that is very appealing to people who think they want the economy of the cloud, but also believe that the cloud as we practice it means loss of control or compromise of security. It's crucial to point out two things. Number one, the things that people think are liabilities of the true cloud are hypothetical problems that have not arisen in over a decade of delivering enterprise cloud services. If it were true that a multi-tenant database involved a reduced level of security, I think we would have had by now at least one successful attack against a multi-tenant database. And I think if that had happened, you might possibly have read about it somewhere. The fact is, it has not happened. Any attacks that have taken place with any success against any large-scale cloud provider have not been attacks against the technology. They've been successful breaches of trust. They've been social engineering attacks, or they've been disgruntled employees abusing authorized access. The technology of the true cloud has demonstrated that it can deliver robust security and excellent auditability and governance. So that's one issue. The fact is, the supposed downsides of the true cloud are hypotheticals that have not actually been borne out by any history. Then there's the supposed upside of what you would get if you could have everything that a cloud gives you, only you own and operate it yourself. I think it was Phil Wainwright who said, if you take cloud technology out of the cloud, all that you have left is technology. If you own and operate your own plane, we normally call that flying a corporate jet. Calling it your private airline doesn't suddenly make it more scalable or more economical. And it helps really if we put this in a larger context, because people ask me all the time, how is the cloud model any different from models we've known for a long time, like the ASP model? And I say, okay, look, at the time when airplanes were beginning to be robust enough that they were more than hobbies or daredevil stunt devices, when you started flying people around who were just paying to be passengers, that would be something like a DC-3, which would seat maybe 20 people. If I want to move 2,000 people with DC-3s, I need 100 of them. That's 100 pilots and 200 engines. That's a lot of skilled people and a lot of complex maintenance. I could have an airline running that class of technology, but it's just not in the same class as what you have today, where you've got something like an A380, and I can move 2,000 people with 4 planes, with 4 pilots, and hey, I can throw in co-pilots now, so it's actually safer than what I had before. Now I've only got 8 trained people instead of 100, and I'm only maintaining 16 engines instead of 200. That's massive economy of scale. Multiple orders above what you were able to achieve with the older technology. That's why I think it's useful to use a label like cloud instead of a label like ASP, because it's simply operating at levels of efficiency and robustness and reliability and governability that were not achievable before you develop the kind of technology that's used today by someone like an Amazon Web Services or a Salesforce.com. Well, what then of the private cloud? Well, if you extend my airplane and airline analogy, then A private cloud means I covet the technology that's being used by these big cloud providers. I see its power, I see its economy, and I want one that's all mine. We have one of those in the United States. It's called Air Force One. It's a big 747, great economy of scale, dedicated to the service of one particular institution. And you know, when I look at that, I think, yeah, there are some people, like the guy in the White House, who has a business case for applying that kind of technology to a completely dedicated application, but there aren't very many institutions or organizations or individuals in this world who could possibly construct a business case for this. Now, here's where I see this as really shaping the debate. I continually hear analysts say that they've surveyed CIOs, and CIOs would, quote, prefer a private cloud, unquote. Well, I've got two answers for that. Number one, I travel a lot. I would prefer a private jet. I don't think I'm going to get one. I don't think I'm going to be able to explain to my company expense department that my preference for the flexibility and comfort of a private jet outweighs the enormous cost disadvantage to the company of meeting that preference. So number one, preference is not a very good argument to use when you're talking about spending way more money than you need to spend to achieve a business objective. And the other one is that when someone says, I prefer a private cloud, you know, I said the other day, this is like asking a fairy tale princess, which would you rather ride, a horse or a unicorn? And a unicorn sounds really cool. And you would probably say, oh, I'd much rather ride the unicorn. Well, the fact is there aren't any. And there aren't any private clouds. Cloud means two things. It means that capital budgeting is no longer part of IT provisioning. It means you do not have to begin the conversation about meeting a business need, solving an enterprise problem, entering a new market. You do not need to begin that conversation anymore with, well, what is in the capital budget? Maybe we can do this next quarter. Maybe we can do this next year. As far as I'm concerned, it is essential to the label of the cloud that if you know what you want to do, you can begin to do it right away. And the other aspect of the cloud that I think is absolutely inseparable from the label is that if you are licensing and installing and patching and updating a big, hairy, complicated stack of software that is in no way creating competitive advantage for your business, but is merely the stack of commodity stuff that you have to keep running before you can add business value on top of it, you know what? If you're doing that yourself, you are not practicing cloud computing. You are practicing software infrastructure maintenance. It's expensive and time-consuming, and it does not create competitive advantage. And if either of those elements is present, if you are investing capital assets and incurring the delays of a capital budgeting process, if you are maintaining a complex but undifferentiating software stack, that's not cloud computing. And I don't care whether you call it private or shared or community or any of the labels that are being used for the unicorns of the cloud computing conversation. The reality of the cloud is what we call public clouds or true clouds deliver faster time to value, deliver massive economy of scale, deliver superior security, reliability, and governability. And that is why in time, that's the only kind of cloud that's going to matter.
Peter, let me put you on the hot seat. What are 5 problems that you see with this private cloud? It sounds like a great marketing term. What are 5 problems that you see with it?
There are 5 fundamental problems with the notion of, oh, let's build a private cloud. Number 1, you will continue to be subject to the delays and difficulties of a capital budgeting process. You will not embark on business initiatives in a timely and aggressive manner. Number 2, you will lovingly preserve everything you don't like about your current software infrastructure and development cycle. If you are unhappy with the time it takes to get an application built and tested and deployed today, you will still be unhappy with the time it takes to do these things in a so-called private cloud. Number 3, any software security or reliability defects that you have today, you will preserve, and in fact you will add to them, because virtualization layers and hypervisors create additional opportunities for attack. You will not be able, realistically, to keep pace with the rate of innovation that is already demonstrably and sustainably being achieved by true cloud providers. Salesforce.com delivers 3 upgrades a year, again and again and again, year after year, while 2/3 of thick clients today are running a 10-year-old desktop operating system. And in fact, most traditional enterprise software only sees about 1/3 of its customers running the current release. And finally, as we move to an environment where social network capability and mobile device capability are the norm and not interesting experiments, it is ludicrous to go to the trouble of building your own apparatus inside your own castle walls and then finding yourself forced to tunnel out through those walls to connect to these rich cloud communities and mobility environments. It makes so much more sense to build the facilities you want in an environment that's already close to and part of those communities and begin to take advantage of their value immediately.
Say 5 or 6 private cloud vendors all coalesced and offered to pay you $500,000 to recommend private cloud to customers. Could you possibly do it?
I would never use the label of private cloud for the same reason that I would never use the label of unicorn rental. I mean, I'm sorry, the label makes no sense. It's as I said in other contexts, an attractive adjective and an attractive noun combined into a contradictory phrase. And if you think of the cloud as a cost reduction strategy, the private cloud sort of might make sense, the so-called private cloud, because it's a modernization of the data center that improves its efficiency. But it does not create the opportunity for innovation. It does not create the dramatic improvement in time to value. It does not empower the business unit to get problems solved that the traditional infrastructure-dominated IT operation has enforced upon them. And so it represents, I think, really selling short the potential of where the future of IT should be taking us.
So if you wanted to kind of ruin your competitors' chances, you'd probably send them over to the private cloud, I think, so that is, in sum.
If there were a company that I were trying to strand in the muck of 20th century IT for just another 10 or 20 years, I would encourage them to believe the things that are being said about so-called private clouds. Because if you think that this is going to get you the economies and efficiencies of the cloud without dealing with the cultural issues of comfort with the security and the operational management of an outside provider, then in the very short run, you may be able to persuade key decision makers that this is a viable path, but in the long run, and I don't mean a long, long run, I mean in the next 2 or 3 years, you will discover that you have traded your birthright for a mess of pottage, and that you are stuck with a very expensive asset, a very complex environment, that you are not able to attract and retain top IT talent because they look at the mess you've built and they don't see any career value for them in keeping it running, and you will find that you've made a very expensive mistake.
That's great. Thank you very much, Peter. We're here at Sydney looking over the harbor. It's somewhat of a rainy day, but Peter's talking about cloud, of course. Thanks very much, Peter.